The summer of 1940 brought not the hum of tractors, but the drone of warplanes. In the quiet fields of Sussex, 64-year-old Thomas Hale laid down his plow for the last time. Dunkirk was over, France had fallen, and now the skies above England trembled with approaching peril. A letter arrived, bearing the mark of the Observer Corps, a call to service for those whose eyes could be sharper than guns. Hale's wife, Margaret, watched as he adjusted his cap and said softly, "The land's defended best when all hands are steady." Within days, he stood atop a wooden post overlooking rolling fields, a telescope in his weathered grasp. From dawn to dusk, he watched the horizon, learning to distinguish the shriek of a Spitfire from the thunderous growl of a Messerschmitt. The war had found him, not in a trench, but in the skies above his own farm.
By mid-July 1940, the Battle of Britain was no longer rumor. It was daily thunder. Thomas stood beside his young partner, Corporal Allen, noting aircraft movements by compass and time. 3 aircraft approaching from the southeast, altitude 2,000. Allen shouted above the wind. Moments later, the faint staccato of gunfire rolled across the bounds. Bursts of silver and smoke rippled through the clouds. Through his scope, Hale caught glimpses of contrails tangled like white scars across the blue. The Observer Corps posts lit up across the coast with calls to the filter rooms, sending information to RAF Fighter Command. Though his heart pounded, Hale stayed steady, each report a lifeline for the pilots above. Below, the hedgerows trembled from distant detonations. It was then he realized his farmland was now England's first line of defense.
Days bled into nights of sleepless vigilance. The phone lines crackled with urgency. Every sighting was logged, triangulated, and relayed to RAF bases at Tangmere and Biggin Hill. The wind carried the distant rumble of bombs dropped upon London, and Hale could almost feel the tremor beneath their Sussex soil. Rain battered the post's wooden planks, but he refused to leave. Margaret would bring tea in enamel mugs, her face pale with worry. "You'll wear yourself to the bone, Tom." He smiled faintly, eyes still fixed skyward. The binoculars had left marks around them, rings of fatigue etched by duty. Above, the war's rhythm never ceased. The old man knew that around him, hundreds of eyes were doing the same, forming an invisible web of defense stretching across England's coasts. Their war was fought in silence, yet it thundered louder in their hearts than any gunfire ever could.
In August, radar stations along the coast crackled with warnings, but many gaps were still filled by human eyes. Hale and Allen were those eyes. Their post was tethered to a field telephone line that connected them to the Guildford Operations Center. The voice on the other end was quick and clipped, an unseen commander piecing the nation's defense together. Report confirmed, Sussex Post 17. Maintain observation. Thomas nodded, replying, "Understood. Bandits approaching Hastings sector, low altitude." The old farmer's voice joined hundreds across Britain, each calm under pressure, each vital to survival. When enemy bombers passed overhead, the air roared so loud his coat flapped against his chest. He could almost see the faces of young Germans staring down from their cockpits. War was faceless no longer. It drummed on the very air he breathed.
September 15th, 1940, a date that would later be called Battle of Britain Day. From early morning, the roar was unending. Hale could hear the clash even before he saw it. Dozens of bombers, black silhouettes against the sun, approached in formation. "God help those boys," he whispered, as a squadron of Spitfires clawed up to intercept. The sky erupted, arcs of tracer fire, twisting trails of white and gray. Pieces of burning metal rained down upon the fields beyond Horsham. Hale's post shook as a damaged bomber thundered low, its engines screaming. Allen shouted coordinates into the field phone, voice trembling but sure. When the sky cleared at last, smoke and contrails hung like ghostly ribbons over Sussex. Hale removed his cap, bowing his head not in fear, but in prayer for all who fought unseen.
By autumn, the Luftwaffe shifted tactics. Night raids haunted England now. Hale and Allen manned the post by lamplight, their breath visible in cold mist. The sky turned black, save for the dull glow of searchlights sweeping along the horizon. Occasionally a bomber's silhouette was caught, frozen before the anti-aircraft guns opened in fury. The radio crackled faintly with distant orders. Margaret's candle still burned in their cottage window, a silent beacon across the hedgerows. Sleep became a stranger. Each groan of wind could be mistaken for an engine. The old man's eyes ached, but he dared not rest. Somewhere above, invisible death passed over the homeland he had tilled for a lifetime. He thought of his son at sea and whispered to the darkness, "We'll keep them out, lad. We'll keep them out."
Morning brought exhaustion and ash. Thomas tried to tend his fields when duty allowed, though the wheat was spoiled in places by falling wreckage. Once he found a shard of painted metal lodged near the fence, a fragment of a Luftwaffe wing, cold and alien. The war had left its scars on his land. Nearby villagers gathered news from the radio, their faces turned solemn at Churchill's grave tones. Yet amidst it, life persisted. Children played near sandbagged bus stops. Orchards still ripened under gray skies. For Hale, the farm and the observation post had merged. Both needed care, patience, and unyielding faith. When he returned to his watch, he carried soil on his boots and courage in his chest. He knew the battle was not only for the sky, it was for the soul of their island itself.
One frosty morning, a motorbike roared down the lane. The rider brought a letter bearing the seal of the Air Ministry. It recognized the efforts of the Sussex Observation Post No. 17 during the critical air battles of September. Hale unfolded it carefully, reading aloud to his wife, his voice trembling. Allen's name was listed, along with his own, a commendation for their vigilance and accuracy under fire. For a long moment neither spoke. Outside, the frost glittered like silver dust over the hedges. Margaret finally smiled. "They saw what you did, Tom. The whole country did." He nodded slowly, aware that the true reward was a sky that no longer burned as before. The roars had lessened, the nights quieter. For the first time in months, there was the faint promise of peace carried by the winter wind. By the turn of the year, the great air battles had waned. The Observer Corps posts remained active, ever watching. Snow blanketed the hills, softening the scars of war. Thomas sat within his timber shelter, a small brazier glowing by his feet. The stillness unnerved him at first. Silence after chaos seemed too fragile. He wrote brief notes in his logbook. Dates, weather, sightings of lone aircraft, now fewer and fewer. The vast roaring skies had grown still, yet his eyes still sought shapes among the clouds. He was part of a living chain that had saved their island. When the bells rang faintly from the nearby church, he smiled. They sounded like the earth finally exhaling. The war was not over, but the storm had passed over Sussex for now, leaving only the whisper of gratitude upon the winter wind.
Years later, Thomas would be remembered as part of the quiet army of the skies, the men and women of the Royal Observer Corps. Their unarmed vigilance had saved countless lives and shaped victory's edge. Looking back, Hale often said he never felt fear, only duty. Standing once more on the ridge above his fields, now peaceful and golden, he whispered to the horizon that had once trembled with warplanes. The land endured because its people refused to blink. The story of the Battle of Britain belonged not only to pilots and aces, but to watchful eyes like his, steady, unseen, but indispensable. As evening light spread over Sussex, the sky seemed boundless and calm at last. Thomas Hale removed his cap, smiling into the wind. England's sentinels had done their watch well.